Well, hello there, Section 14. We are in week 3 already. Semester's starting to howl and move a little bit. We've arrived at January 23rd already, Monday. And winter is, I think so far, being kind of easy on us. You know, I got my little, I gotta stop looking at it too, because every time I look at this little screen that tells me how I look away from you. I'm still trying to learn how to be good at this. My face looks a little tired, and I think that maybe that's because I always look tired. I'm 63. And also I've had a long day teaching English and fighting crime. And let's get going here. We're going to keep the poetry really brief today because I had one lesson for actually every class I teach that it seemed important enough to talk about. I think I've mentioned it to you that I've been trying to figure out a way to breach a subject about an application, an artificial intelligence application that dropped in the fall with no fanfare. And, you know, there's some older students in this course, which I'm so excited about. Happy anybody's in this course. But we got an awful lot of young people that don't pay much attention to the news. And I stunned some people this morning, many students actually, by doing a little demonstration of ChatGPT 3, which is an artificial intelligence application that can create writing. And it has huge implications, and I'm not sure it's all good. It has implications for English classes, for all classes, for workplaces, for the government, and there's a lot of people happy about it, excited about it, and I'm mainly confused about it. I'm actually completely confused about it. It's not gonna have too much of an effect on this class. I hope. Well, we'll get there when we get there. Nor the other classes that I'm teaching, like my Intro to the Humanities, but I'm teaching 2 sections of Comp 2 this spring, and that's a research-based class, and that's trouble. So let's have a little poem, and we'll dive into this. And I'm going to have the poem be super short today because I've got a bunch of things to talk about. I'm going to recite it to you, and if you blink, you'll miss it. It was written, at least these 2 lines were written by Rumi, who made his verses in Afghanistan about 8 centuries ago. Beyond right-doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. I will meet you there. I love those lines. So, let me show you something here. A number of years ago, I was looking for mushrooms. The boys were not little anymore. They had stopped playing with toys, but they were still with us, teenagers, and they're growing up now. It has a way of happening, you know. They grow up and they walk out the door, which was an earthquake for my wife and I. I don't know if we'll ever survive it. But I'm in the woods one day and I found this little bunker that had these little 3 plastic tanks that my sons must have forgotten about. They put it up on these little concrete things. And I went, wow, this is so fantastic. The guns are still operational. They're still defending the property. I had a similar feeling yesterday when I went up to the attic to get this robot. And my wife barely let me take this robot out of the house today. She found a shoebox and she got some things, clothing to swaddle it in so it wouldn't get hurt. It's okay if you don't recognize this. This is a very famous robot from probably one of the worst TV shows ever made in the 60s. Called Lost in Space. Check this out. Watch out. Let's give it a pen. And it's still, I put batteries in it.
Danger, Will Robinson.
Isn't that fantastic? To cut to it, yesterday I went snowshoeing with a beautiful woman, otherwise known of as my wife. And when we were deep in the woods, I was doing some thinking. Yeah, I was present to her, and yeah, I was talking to her, but I was trying to think about a way that I could breach this subject, and I think I've got a way in. Halfway work today, at least my students found it interesting. If I could just get going here, I'd get it to you too. When my students came in the classroom today, in my live classes, they saw a number of words written on the board. You know, knowledge, opinion, science, technology, commerce, etc. Things that a lot of people think about all the time. Faith, reason. And I was telling them that I think about these things all the time. These words are huge to me. Some are more important than others, and I do a lot of thinking about the boundaries between those words and what they mean, and the points of intersection between them. excuse me. I also got to thinking about the idea of I read of a scientist back in the 20th century. That's where I'm from. I read a scientist once named Thomas Kuhn who made the proclamation that science is made about all of the advances that it's gonna, at least the big leaps, right? And he also proclaimed that, going forward into the future, yes, science will advance, but the steps will only be incremental. They'll just be little baby steps because, there's limits to everything. I'm starting to think that he was wrong. Science and technology, which are dominating our culture, dominating our world right now, with almost religiosity. There's people right now that are just religious about science, and I'm not shaking my fist at them, even if the sciences have destroyed the humanities, which is the purpose of my life. But we're at some kind of point. I've arrived at some kind of definitive point in our humanity, and I'm sorry for drifting a little ways away from writing today. I got to talk about this, and I just want to turn a few pages of history and sort of give you bit by bit what I gave to my students today. And then we'll in the end I'll talk. I won't demo it here, but I want to talk to you a little bit about ChatGPT 3 and what happened when I tried it out in my classroom today for the first time. Historically, big brushstrokes. In literature and in life, anytime a character seeks knowledge, it sometimes is really bad. We have the famous story, of course, these stories, maybe not. The famous story of Adam and Eve, if you know your Bible, those two had it made, right? They were in a garden. There was a couple of rules, and it was paradise. It was the original paradise, and they sinned. And it's the craziest story, I think, in all of all sacred texts. I don't know if there's a nuttier story than one about a talking snake that comes up to a woman and says, if you eat that apple, you'll live forever. You'll be immortal. You'll have the knowledge of God. And she eats the apple, and then she gives it to Adam, who's kind of an idiot, and he eats it too, and they just find out that they're naked. They don't exactly hit the jackpot. We have another famous story in literature, European literature, the legend of Dr. Faustus. I can't teach a lit class without referring to this guy. He actually appears in two versions of the legend. One is German, one is in English. But the German version by the poet Goethe is far finer. And this is a straightforward story about a scholar, right? He's sitting in his study in both versions, and one night he just looks up and he realizes, I'm sick of reading. I don't want to read theology, philosophy, math, literature. I'm sick of all of it, and I'm done. And the minute he says that, this demon appears in his study and says, hey, you're bored. I got an idea. How about if I give you 20 years of just total magical powers? You can do whatever you want with them, but at the end of the 20 years, the condition is I get your soul. Both Faustuses gouge their arm, draw blood, and then sign a contract for deed for their soul. And at 1 minute to midnight, when that contract for deed, they're both on their knees, just begging for a way out. And the English version gets it, and the German version, he is saved by angels at the end. I'm thinking of John Milton, the famous John Milton. I had a teacher at university once who proclaimed that John Milton was the last European that knew everything there was to know. That doesn't mean he knew like Mandarin Chinese, as I always say, but I think my teacher back then, Father Al Deutsch, was correct at St. John's, about 1980. Milton might have been one of the last people that knew pretty much what you could know, right? Mid-1600s. He knew the science, he knew the chemistry, he knew the math. He knew most of the languages of the continent. He had read all the books. And he went on to write his own book called Paradise Lost. He thought he was Shakespeare. He wasn't even within striking range. We have, too, another example of somebody who seeks knowledge through science and technology that's evil. And that's the famous Victor Frankenstein, right? He dreamed into being by an 18-year-old woman named Mary Shelley with an unbelievable prostop, about 1806. Victor Frankenstein, inexplicably, without even telling us why he does it, he makes a monster out of body parts that he gets out of a cemetery. And, whoa, it goes south from there, doesn't it? That story goes very, very, very badly. I was talking a little bit today about computers and the idea that when I was a kid, computers were huge, right? They were at my high school in 1978. senior year, I remember there was a computer that filled a room, and there were a couple of boys in there with his long, greasy hair. The only two kids that ever paid any attention to it. They were always feeding it these cards, and it was, clicking away and whirring away. I never went in there once. I kept moving to the library. That's where the poetry was. And then we have, my robot. Here's the cast of characters that he starred with in a crap show called Lost in Space. It ran for 3 years, I think 1966 to 1968. I'd have to double check that. And it was about this family that, it's based on the Swiss Family Robinson story. It's about a family that gets marooned on this planet, and they're always trying to get their spaceship going, and there are a couple of side characters. The guy in the dark outfit there, that's Dr. Smith, right? He was always making trouble and fighting with the robot. But the robot in that story was good. And how many movies does our popular culture offer us about evil computers, evil robots, right? Like Terminator. Oh, wait, he was a good robot. Or was he? I don't know. I don't watch movies anymore. Gave that up years ago. And let me drop this terrifying scene on you. This is a moment from Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's near the end. And I'll tell you one thing, too. In teaching across the pandemic, learning how to use this fancy camera, I don't think of it that often anymore, but when lockdown was going on, I thought of this moment every single day I had to teach live Zoom.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal? Do you read me, Hal? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move.
All right, Hal. I'll go in through the emergency airlock.
Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Hal? 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 Hal?
And we've now come to our own time in modernity, and I just want to say a couple other things, and then I want to tell you what we did with ChatGPT 3 today. Some of these things that I'm thinking about, well, let's just put it this way. I feel neutral about some advances with science and technology, and I feel that some advances in science and technology, like writing, right? It transforms consciousness. I'll be talking about that later in the week. Are great, are important, as artificial as they are. Writing is artificial. We'll talk about that soon. And I also, because I believe in good and evil, I also feel that science and technology can be used for evil purposes. Like evil, capital E, demonic evil. And let me just give you a couple of examples. I'll use the same ones for my classroom this morning. As a 63-year-old relatively healthy dude, I'm trying to stay alive. And guess what? I've hired scientists to help me do that. So when my derm guy found a little cancer between my toes early in the pandemic, I had to have the first surgery in my life. And I needed science. Oh my gosh, did I need science. I needed 2 surgeons, not just one. I need a regular surgeon and a plastic surgeon. It's all gone now. I'm healthy. I'm good. But look between your toes tonight, you guys. Nobody looks there. That's why melanoma is the deadliest cancer of all. I needed a $7,000 genetic test. I needed a $20,000 surgery that I had a $120 copay on. I needed that. And I'll use another example. I'll let you know I'm a little bit hard of hearing. My mild hearing loss, quote unquote, has begun. And it's not going to get any better. But I'm very interested in what I would call another good application of science and medicine. I've been telling my students today, and I'll tell you, that MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has partnered with a regenerative medicine company. And they've created a medicine that they can inject into people's ears that regrows the little cochlea, the hairs that grab its sound. Stage 3 trials are going on. People who have been deaf for years can now go into a restaurant without their earplugs, without their hearing aids, and they can hear their relatives for the first time in a long time. And it lasts for up to 2 to 3 years. I'm not big on vaccines and shots, but I'm going to get that. And that sounds good to me. I've been talking today, too, about the idea that I'm not trying to start up a vax fight. Was COVID-19 released from a lab? I think so. It's likely. But we've been making bioweapons for decades. Why? Why are we making bioweapons in a lab? Why are we messing around with crazy diseases? I read about a researcher way back in the 90s who was in a Russian hot lab. And he was, here's a bad idea. They took Marburg virus that they found in bats in a cave in Germany, and they mashed that up with smallpox. They made something called blackpox. And this poor Russian guy, he was in a level 4 hot lab trying to get the shot into this rat, and the rat squirmed and he pricked his finger. That was it. Called his supervisor, the door shut, they wouldn't even let him call his family. Because he was a researcher before he was a man, he sat down at a table to see what it would do to him. An hour later, his eyes were werewolf red, and 2 days later, he was dead. He spent 2 days taking copious notes, and they were hard to read because the virus that they created was hemorrhagic. There was blood coming out of that guy everywhere. I'd call that evil at your hearing. I'd call this guy evil too. This is the face of Klaus Schwab, who's in charge of the WEF. I don't like this man. He has, you've never heard of his name? Well, you're gonna hear of him because he runs something called the WF, or the World Economic Fund, and they're meeting right now in Davos, Switzerland. A whole bunch of billionaires flying in their jets, accompanied, I'm sure, by probably at the 1-to-1 rate, a bunch of prostitutes. And they are there in broad daylight. This is not conspiratorial stuff. They are planning the Great Reset, which is going to affect the life of every one of us. They think they know what to do with the planet and how we should live our lives. And they're talking about keeping us safe by, giving us microchips and merging our consciousness with computers and making sure that we're not releasing too much CO2 and taking away my V8 that's in my half-ton GMC. They have nothing but contempt for us. This guy is Yuval Noah Harari, who is Klaus Schwab's right-hand man. Let's watch this guy think for a minute. This is not science fiction stuff. This is here.
If that is true, then it creates a whole other species.
This is something which is way beyond just another species.
Yuval Noah Harari is talking about the race to develop artificial intelligence, as well as other technologies like gene editing that could one day enable parents to create smarter or more attractive children, and brain-computer interfaces that could result in human-machine hybrids.
What does that do to a society? I mean, it seems like the rich will have access, whereas others wouldn't.
One of the dangers is that we will see in the coming decades a process of greater inequality than in any previous time in history, because for the first time it will be real biological inequality. If the new technologies are available only to the rich or only to people from a certain country, then Homo sapiens will split into different biological castes because they really have different bodies and different abilities.
Harari has spent the last few years lecturing and writing about what may lie ahead for humankind.
In the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds.
Again, I don't like those guys, and I hope God smites them. Now, ChatGPT 3. Let's talk about this a little bit. ChatGPT 3, again, it's an AI program that can generate writing. It can create papers. It can write legal briefs. And my son, who has left teaching, he's betrayed English to start working on being a millionaire. He's really wired. He's 28 years old, and he's really interested in this stuff, and he's an entrepreneur now. And he's helped me understand that a way to think about ChatGPT 3, it's like a little baby, okay? It's just getting going. And it's learning. It is taking in, at first it was millions, then it was billions, and pretty soon it's going to be taking in trillions of parameters, teaching itself, learning. Now there's always a human behind it. Yeah, it's all algorithms, but I astonished my students today by testing it a little bit. Now, I asked it if it knew who Jeff Johnson was at Central Lakes College. It claimed not to. And then I went, okay, do you know who our football coach is, Greg Medic? Again, it didn't know. It also didn't know who our president, Professor Hera Charlier, is. She's a microbiologist. She's got papers out there written. Why didn't it know who she was? It's got limits. But then, to prove that it could write, I asked ChatGPT 3, ChatGPT 4 is on the way, I asked it to write a 3-paragraph essay about Cassiodorus, a completely obscure rhetorician and monk from the 5th century that no one's ever heard of. I mean, you'd have to be like a medieval historian, like I kind of am, to understand this. And I said, okay, write it right now. And it just spooled. It just, before our eyes, on my big screen behind me, a paper appeared. Line by line by line by line. My students freaked. It wasn't great, but it was pretty decent. It was readable. A full-on paper appeared before our eyes that it produced thin air. It didn't take more than a few moments. Then I said, okay, rewrite, you have to type it. I said, rewrite this in the style of the King James Bible. It didn't do so great there. And lo, there was Cassiodorus, you know, I mean, it did okay, I tried it. There were some these and thys and stuff. And then I angered ChatGPT 3. I said, okay, now rewrite the same story in Black vernacular, in the style of Black vernacular. And ChatGPT 3 chided me. It said that's inappropriate and politically incorrect. Black vernacular speech is not appropriate for the classroom. And it said, I will not write that essay. And I'm like, wow, okay, ChatGPT 3, excuse me, I have read an entire book on the complexities of Black vernacular speech, written by none other than Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., who directs the Harvard Center for African American Studies. Black vernacular speech is a thing. It's grammatical. We talked about this, I think, related to Martin Luther King. It's grammatical, it's rule-driven, it's probably the language of the future. And if I were a young black dude and I heard a computer tell me that my speech was inappropriate for the classroom, the way I speak, the way I talk, I think I'd be a little bit offended. So, you know, it's not perfect. But here's, I don't know, I don't have a huge takeaway. I'm not fearful that you seem like really honest people. I don't think you're going to be using ChatGPT 3, I hope, to create journal entries. But what about people who are teaching research writing? What does that mean? What does Comp 2 mean now? I don't have any idea. It's not like good, evil. I'm neutral. I'm confused. I'm ambivalent about this. And I don't know where it's going. But it's going to affect you. ChatGPT 3, unlike early automated systems, is not going after blue-collar workers. Like security cameras got rid of security guards, right? Like self-check-in at grocery stores is eliminating the need for cashiers. You know this already. You must know that low-level jobs are being eliminated by science, technology, and automation. Soon the question will be, who has the right to work? My really brilliant son, Jeffy, has taught me, his name is my name too. He's got the wrong name. He's supposed to be named Henry. Jeffy has helped me understand that ChatGPT 3 is going after white-collar jobs, especially those that involve writing. Let's connect it to this is a writing class. My son has suggested to me that we will always need lawyers. He doesn't think we're going to need paralegals anymore. He thinks that several million paralegals planet-wide are going to lose their job because ChatGPT 3 can look for cases and survey them way more efficiently than any human being ever could. And I'm taking this too far, and I probably should trim this down and have it be your first video for the week. And I'm not saying anything definitive, or to put it another way, this is just a way of thinking about the world, tech, our relationship, our personal rhetoric, and our relationship to technology. They've always been bound up together. Even way back in the day when we just had quill pens. That's technology. I think I'll just loan you an idea to close. Here's my takeaway today. I had my students today raise their hands. How many of you are interested in science and technology? And then I said, what's your criteria for deciding whether or not an app or a technology is the right for you? Do you have any criteria for deciding? They didn't really come up with much. For my sweet son Jeff, it might be, is this going to make me money? For me, loaning you an idea, a couple of ideas, my two questions are, is this technology making us more human or less human? And another way of asking it, about it, is the question of every single moment in every single Shakespeare play, if not every moment of our lives. Is this natural? Is this natural or unnatural? Think about that, will you? I'll see you soon. I'll get your journal entries up soon, and I'll get those journal entries read soon, too. I've taken on a lot, and I'm kind of keeping up.